Hello everybody, this is James the Bow on Discovering Season 5, dedicated to original peoples, and this is the return, first podcast back today, and we got a special guest on today, Mr. Ben Fleming. How are you doing, Ben?
I'm good, thank you very much, James. Good to be here, glad to be part of the podcast.
Great to have you on anyway. We're going to have some deep discussion today. We're going to go, how deep does the rabbit hole go? That's what it's about. Yeah. But anyway, let's deal with your timeline anyway. You've got your Masters in Ancient History, and also you did Bachelor's degree of Honours.
Yeah, Bachelor's, yeah. So I did my Bachelor's in Combined Honours in Ancient History and Classics at the University of Liverpool. And I feel like that gave me an introduction kind of to the literature side of it. I was brought up, my nan did classical literature at University of Liverpool, so I was kind of brought up on it in a lot of ways. So I had a very interesting upbringing in terms of education and stuff like that. But I feel like the Masters was where my professional interest in history came about.
Okay.
I feel like that's where my understanding of archaeology developed as well.
Right, okay. Yeah. So you already had I remember you saying to me before, people in your family, your background, were into classical. Yeah. So we're dealing with like more or less the Greeks, Romans.
That's it. Yeah, that was it. So the first ever piece of classical literature, that I was introduced to was the Iliad, which is Troy. The film Troy with Brad. So this was before the film. This was when we went to Rhodes on holiday, and me and my little brother, after we'd been out in the daytime, we'd sit on the balcony, and my nan would read the Iliad to us, bits of the Iliad, and it really in terms of my imagination, it made me really interested in not so much ancient history at that point, but the myths and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that kind of just developed as I got older, and I started to engage with different things. And I think I didn't go to university till I was 23, so I wasn't the traditional route.
Okay.
And when I did get to university, it just, studying something I was really, really interested in from a young age, it was an excellent experience.
Well, you know what, it's one of those things that sticking at the history, and what I like about you yourself, you're not just only structured to look in one direction. There's a lot of challenges, just as black people anyway. There's the challenges we face. So with archaeology, because I know you study a lot of archaeology, which is interesting. Sometimes you seem to find one of the sites which you were telling me about. I was looking on the other day, and it's showing you the stone tools that predate humanity. And I like anything like this, because this has given the archaeologists a challenge as well, because we don't know exactly how far humanity goes back. I don't think we can put a specific date. All we can say is, as far as what we found is black people, the original people, African people, wherever we are in this planet. That's the solidest evidence. But to say exact date, it's hard to with an anthropologist as well, it's hard to duck the common ancestor with apes.
Of course, yeah.
You'd be classed as irresponsible, or you wouldn't be considered as a proper anthropologist.
Yeah.
So from your research now, would you think that it's impossible, that the science has got to be right when he says we have a common ancestor with apes? Also, our timeline on this planet as modern humans, we first said Ethiopia 200,000 years ago. Then later on, when the research got better, fossils found in Morocco 300,000 years. So do you think in the future we're going to see findings that's going to be much older than that's what's led on at the moment?
In my opinion, as somebody who anthropology is something that I'm very interested in, but also evolution as a theory.
Yeah, as a
because
theory.
Evolution's got it's got a lot of different sections within it. But I think that in terms of our as humans, what they call Homo sapien, to think that, you know, they say that the homonym, and that certain homonyms that, like you said, date back up to millions of years ago,
Yeah.
became extinct. I struggle to find how, considering the process of carbon dating and stuff like that, how they could accurately assume
Yeah.
that these species became extinct, because they struggle. I mean, like I said, I've studied mostly Greek and Roman history, like archaeology as well, mainly in Britain. But I think in terms of like prehistory and African archaeology, you're going back a very, very long time.
Definitely.
And carbon dating can't accurately date sites from, say, less than a couple of thousand years ago. So how could they accurately date things that are going back millions of years ago?
Yeah.
And I think it's all a matter of the ability as a historian to always have that thing in the back of your mind of, well, what if you know, things are always changing.
Definitely.
In history, that's the beauty of it. A new find can get found anywhere in the world, and it'll change the perception. And I think that's that's my understanding. I'm not going to form a complete total opinion. Because things could change, and I could get proved to be completely wrong. So you've got to keep it a little bit ambiguous. Which gives us, as people who are studying African and, you know, ancient history of black people, a prehistory of black people as well.
That's right.
A bit of, you know, a bit of imagination.
You got to have an imagination. Definitely, because if you can't think out the box, do you know what I mean? Like, because, you know, it's great to read, it's great to study these anthropologists, archaeologists. You've heard of a man called Robert Bauval? Now, he believes the Sphinx, from what he's researched, the water erosion, that it's older than 2,600 and something BC. You know, he says it's over 10,000 years. Now, because it's not a popular narrative, people will write that off. Now, because you're in, like, you understand how it's presented information. If someone comes with like a Robert Bauval theory, because they call it, how much chance can he get this into the curriculum?
Well, this is something that I've,
you know,
as a somebody who went to university a little bit later as well, and didn't go through the traditional trajectory of education. I went away, I worked, you know, did other things, come back to it out of interest and because of like a bit of a drive in myself to want to get back into education. I've come back to it with my own mind a little bit.
Good.
And I think that, like, that's something that the young, you know, classicist who's come through sixth form and gone to a, you know, a private school or whatever, they haven't really got that. They've been trained.
That's right.
They've been trained to look at things a certain way. And that's another thing that I'd like to go back to about archaeology and my understanding of the skills that archaeology gives to somebody who wants to study it. It's got a lot of transferable skills.
Definitely.
You know, you don't have to necessarily go into it education type thing. You could go into construction and stuff like that, and like or forensics from studying archaeology. And I feel like learning a subject which gives you transferable skills these days is massively important for young people. But going back to education, I feel like my experience of studying history, and I use the word imperialism, and that's a very, you know, old-fashioned word. I don't think that necessarily might be what it was. I think it was just power structures.
That's what, definitely.
And I think in Western Europe, definitely, they didn't want to give, you know, the people who come here, you know, as immigrants or whatever, a sense of self. They wanted them to become emerged with the power structure. So I feel like that's why education was very, very highly controlled.
give us a sign.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
in terms of the education system, when I say imperialistic, which again I say it's a word that is quite old-fashioned. Education was in them times was designed to produce a certain type of person, and that person was somebody who was gonna embody the values of the current system.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's now, in the world we're in now, that doesn't exist in that sense anymore. It still does in certain ways, but like I feel like history for me is the pursuit of truth. And as people from African heritage and ancestry, it's very difficult to get a full truth of our history. So when I think about my experience of education, I think it was a good thing that I came back a little bit later to education. And I think that all the things that are happening now, like the decolonise movement, stuff like that, even though whatever's going on with them, I feel like there's more facility for this sort of thing for people like us, to learn our history. And that's when I say imperialism and education, that's what I mean. I mean, like, people have been trained to be a historian. They've been trained by the education system. Whereas I don't think there's any official training you can have to be a great historian. You've got to have like a curiosity.
Oh yeah. Definitely agree with that. And the word imperialism is a funny one. Because how Europeans have given the narrative about Africa is they've talked about things like Africans have enslaved each other and done things to each other, but they haven't really expanded on imperialism, as in, I had studying a man named Dr. John Hendrik Clark. So we'll talk about, if you don't know true African history, you're never going to know when Africans ruled over nations. So, like we were saying, imperialism, you wouldn't know what African imperialism would be, because you're denying the fact that they went to India in ancient times. You're denying the fact that they got to China. So if you're denying the fact that we once ruled nations, and with empires, I mean, like, you can look at them as good and bad. I mean, I look at like, well, what did you contribute? That's so. With them, like, I'll give you an example. The Moorish 711, the conquest going into Spain. Now, most conquests we think about, they're not good. But I felt the Moorish conquest benefited Europeans than it caused them any harm.
Yeah, definitely.
What was introduced to them.
Yeah.
So most people don't understand these kind of conquest. A conquest has to be bad most of the time. But that was like probably, I'd say that was a great conquest. Another good conquest, which some people might not believe, is when Ethiopia, Aksum, conquered Arabia, stretched their empire. But the difference is, when Europeans came into Africa and give us their Bible, introduced us to their system. And like, you got some Africans who might not even be speaking, modern Africans speaking their tongue, mother tongue, in their house, for example. So things are getting lost. I'm sure you've looked at, like, say, the manuscripts of Timbuktu. Where what I really liked about that is the local people kept the history. They had to hide it from the French at times because they knew they would have destroyed it, So no one can understand true imperialism. And I'll give you another one. Madagascar, when that was first colonized. So looking at the researchers speaking on that, it's a dispute of who got there first. Did the Austronesian expansion come from Southeast Asia, reach Madagascar, or did the Bantu peoples get there first? It's a dispute. So I'm looking at so many different alternatives to this. When I read about particular people explaining the theory of, well, what they might have believed this is a way to show Africans weren't able to sail. You had to sail to Madagascar. There's no way you're getting there any other way. So what they've done is that they tried to throw their little 2 pence in, where they said, for example, maybe the people from Indonesia came and took Africans as slaves to Madagascar. So that's just their theory. So I thought to myself, well, I could reverse that theory and say, well, maybe we enslaved them, but we're not allowed to enslave other people.
Of course,
We can only enslave each other,
Yeah.
because it's about us being victim
Yeah.
and us always needing this helping hand to get to another place around the world, to be taught that one God, like as if Africans didn't know God before foreign invaders came in. So I think like you can kind of see where I'm going.
Of course, yeah,
You know?
of course I can, and I think, I mean, in terms of prehistory, there's a connection of that I've kind of. I'm probably not the first person to have identified it in terms of my research, but it's a connection that I have established in terms of, you said about Axum, and this was something that I did when I was doing my masters, and it's something that really like opened my eyes to how like connected Africa was to like you said, India and China.
Yeah.
And it was when in 30 BC when Cleopatra and Mark Antony were defeated by Augustus, who was the power in Rome.
Yeah.
And he took over Egypt, and he basically took over the Red Sea trade routes
and that
from Egypt.
Yeah.
Which went right down. They had Ethiopia.
Yeah.
On the route, and then the Horn of Africa round what would be modern day Somalia.
Yeah.
But they used the monsoon season,
the monsoon winds,
to get over to India.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was something that obviously wasn't new. They didn't just invent that, and they didn't even try to like say that they'd invented it.
Yeah.
But they didn't talk in depth about how they learnt about it.
Yeah.
And they clearly learnt about it from the Egyptians. They must have.
The season, because it's 6 months of the year it blows to India, then the 6 months blows to Africa.
And the one of the main things I took from it was that when they traded with an ancient king in Axum. Yeah. And they traded obsidian, which is a mineral. It's like a rock.
Okay.
Black. It's like a black, like it's kind of like onyx, what we know as onyx.
Okay.
But this whole idea of what I was talking about in Lamekwi.
Yeah.
They're really 3.3 million years old. They say they found hand tools. So obsidian it's said to be sharper than steel. It's a very sharp and useful piece of mineral, and the king of Axum would trade this with Rome for other things that the Romans could provide, but it shows that they had a deep, well-established knowledge of different types of mineral and what they could be used for and their value long before Europeans came to Africa. It's obvious. I mean, it's in the ancient text. If you prepare, I mean, it's not in the literature. It's in there's a thing. There's a text it's like an inventory of trade. And trade inventories can provide sometimes more valuable information in terms of finding the truth than ancient classical texts can, because it's just giving you the facts of what was traded and what was found and stuff like that. Yeah. So this obsidian was something that, if you like, when you're looking at Lamekwi and Olodowon, and them really ancient theoretical frameworks for hand tools, like flint knapping and stuff like that, it features in that. Like obsidian was there then, like going back to the middle Stone Age period and stuff like that. So I feel like my studying of archaeology, which was something that I found really interesting, but really I suppose not threatening, but like daunting as a somebody who just come to education at the age of 23, not going through the trajectory. It's something that archaeology can teach us more about history, I think, than classical texts can. Because you're getting an artifact, something that can be studied and broke down with all of the modern techniques of, analysing things and stuff like that. So obsidian's something that I'm really interested in. And it's like you said, Axum, that was the main trade route. Another thing though that I will highlight is that also the Romans in their texts said that the Horn of Africa was known for providing high quality slaves, and that's something that, you know, goes back to something that I commented on in one of my essays about there being a lot of tribal warfare at the time in Africa.
Yeah.
But there was tribal warfare everywhere.
Yeah.
So that's not something that you can say, you know, African people were any less developed.
Yeah.
It was everywhere.
Of
There
course,
were slaves
of course.
all over, in Gaul, France, even in Italy. They took slaves from, do you know what I mean? So
This is what I mean.
it was a common practice,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean that, you know, it was any less, you know...
we got the worst damage of it from the
Yeah.
transatlantic slave trade,
Yeah.
but the word slave is not contained to any particular person.
No, definitely.
doesn't,
I
you know.
agree. Yeah. And I think that another thing that they highlighted in it shows how power works, I suppose, in this ancient text particularly, was that the ancient Ethiopian king was trading in fabrics, coloured fabrics, like red.
Yeah.
They didn't have the knowledge. I don't know if it was the knowledge, but the materials to dye their cloth red. So they trade with that for the Romans, and that was a status thing because nobody else could get that.
Yeah.
And like this whole idea of power structures is very important in terms of you know, items and material stuff.
Yeah.
Even in the ancient world.
It's funny when you mention about trade routes. When trade routes get taken over, this is interesting because you can go back to, speaking of archaeology, you can go look at Kenya, you can look at Ethiopia, and you can see evidence that they traded with Sumer.
Yeah.
And I'm talking around 2500 BC.
Yeah.
You've got evidence. Then there's because archaeology, what I really like about that, I mean, you can go really far back with that, and sometimes you find stuff that predates humanity.
Yeah.
And I think this is where, like, we've got to question the age of humanity as well. We can't just say, yeah, it's 200,000 years or it's 300,000 years from Morocco, because eventually, and also when you're dealing with creation studies, another one, there's people there who believe that Nigeria could be the oldest. Now, not just through words, just saying that.
Yeah.
Fertile areas where they believe that this is more fertile for humanity to be able to develop as into modern humans. But I'm not going to pick a single country because it wouldn't be worth doing that. But what I would say is we've got a long way to go.
Yeah, I agree.
Definitely, we've got a long way to go with a lot of different things with anthropology, how old someone was in these lands. Because when I'm looking at these tribes, I was researching with them for years in Southeast Asia, and I'm looking at them, how long have they been there? Some say 40,000, sometimes you see 30,000, sometimes you see they could be even 100,000. Nobody knows. So it just makes you think, well, we've got to come to a neutral area.
Of course.
You know, and when we say common grounds, I don't mean the popular narrative, because some people lump common ground into that.
Yeah,
you know,
I agree. Yeah.
That's why sometimes I like getting the voiceless people on this show.
Yeah.
Who wouldn't get on any other show sometimes.
Yeah.
As long as you've got a little something to say, that's the main thing. And appreciate yourself. You know, you've gone out, done your research, you got through your maths, and I like the way you haven't just gone through that box mentality of, like you said, you didn't go straight into university. You did what you do, you were working, living life.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Around normal people, average people. Yeah. And then when you've got there, you've learned the game.
Yeah.
And I can see you going further into it though.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, there's definitely more to come from yourself. I can see it clearly.
Yeah, I mean, it's a passion. And I feel like as somebody who has worked in many different industries, you know, catering, whatever, I feel like this is the only thing that still excites me after many years of doing different things, because I feel like
the drive and challenge.
It's a challenge. It is. It's a challenge. But I feel like the competitiveness comes from competing with these, like, you know, really not. I wouldn't call them robotic, but I'd call them like kind of like.
Good name though.
You know, they're very regimented type people.
Yeah.
They've been trained to do it a certain way.
Yeah.
And they're not prepared to go outside the box with it because they won't get the good marks, or they won't get into a research
right.
paper or whatever.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's not really searching for truth, though, is it?
It's not.
That's looking to get a tick in a box.
That's
sort
all.
of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that going back to what you were saying about that middle ground thing, what really, this was before I even went to university. I read it was like a journal, a history journal. They had them in Central Library.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I used to go there all the time when I was unemployed, and I used to go there just to like kill time. And this before I had kids and all that, and I wasn't working, so I'd go there, read through these history journals, and I found an article that was about it was about prehistoric man and their progress. And it was obviously it was in a journal, so a lot of it was like, you know, what we're talking about, that like that established regimented process of looking at evidence and artifacts in that way. And sorry,
yeah,
and it talked about the technology of ancient times and how the ancient man, they say the Neanderthal man, which was different. They've got different, in a lot of ways, different genetic makeup from us. They would use sharpened like spears, and they pin the animal down. And then when they find the bones of Neanderthal men, and obviously women as well, they find a lot of twisted bones where the bones had to heal, which means that they were very clumsy in a lot of ways. And a lot of this, they say, came from when they were hunting, because they wouldn't hunt the same way our ancestors would. They would corner an animal and pin it, and then deliver that would mean that the animal's death throes the kick or whatever of a deer or whatever could break the leg. Whereas our ancestors learned that if you put a piece of hard stone or whatever on the end of your spear, you throw it, it hits the animal runs, it bleeds out, and you can catch it further down the line, as long as you don't let it get away. It's more efficient. And this whole like idea like that they were talking about really and made me realise that technology, what we call technology now, like the phone or whatever, the camera, back then the technology was stone tools, learning how to really get the most out of creating a stone tool. And the final message of this article that really like hit home with me was the idea that the reason we are where we are now, regardless of all the bad stuff, but we're still here surviving, in a lot of ways thriving as human beings, is because we learn to cooperate with each other. Cooperation between two different tribes who were competing. They were competing over resources. They learned to cooperate and say, okay, we've got this bit. As long as you don't come past this tree or come past this boundary, we're okay. Do you know what I mean?
Just give me the countdown. So, you know, it's interesting, like some of the stuff we talked about and that. Now, the word prehistory, we hear this a lot. Now, prehistory, when I hear this is prehistory, it kind of tells me that you're using the word prehistory because you don't know what was happening during these times. But Africans don't speak about this is prehistory. Also, they always write off African linguistics, what they consider as writing. You know, Nigeria they'll have a form of communication where people can understand what's on the wall, you know, so some things get written off and that's not writing. It's like the hieroglyphs, that's writing, isn't it? You know, whether you can understand it, decipher it. Also, where's the future? I mean, I'm wondering about your future as well, because you're a young man, and I can see you're going to keep going, you're going to like expand, and it's down to your own drive, and I can see you going further with this.
I mean, I've got a couple of ideas for my own little web series. It's not really a podcast like this, but we're like sitting in front of someone. I'd like it to grow into something like that, but it's more me looking at using history as a tool to make people think about their own personal development. Looking at people who've, you know, ancient figures who've done amazing things, their upbringing, their challenges, stuff like that. It's got I've got a structure that I've kind of set in place in my own mind and kind of written down in bits and bobs. But I'd like to start that through things like YouTube and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Also, my goal is to become an online tutor of languages, linguistics, like what we're talking about.
Interesting.
Teaching English to be like obviously as the initial starting point because it's my native language. To people who would like to either come and study in the UK or people who would like to live in the UK or would just like to learn English who are from places like places like Qatar and Dubai and places like China as well.
Yeah.
This is something that I've kind of dealt with a little bit in me profession, like me work sphere since I've left university. But the main thing I think for me is to get out of the structure of working as an employee. I want to become somebody who can become self-employed.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the future, not just of
independence,
us as human beings, but as like the future of Britain as well.
Yeah.
In order to thrive, you've got to be somebody with a little bit of entrepreneurial attitude.
Yeah.
Especially if you've got, people that depend on you and you need to, increase your revenue. You can't just look for a better job. You've got to create something for yourself. I think the whole social media world and things like what is going on here in the studio and stuff like that, it gives people that opportunity to expand their own talents and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's the future in my opinion, in my sphere. So yeah, that's where my future lies, I think. Yeah,
well, at the end of the day, it's just about continuing the mission and see where it takes you.
Yeah.
Because I got into history like very young. Well, it wasn't so much history from the beginning. It was just my father's side Nigerian, so I'm given the culture from young, and then it's about building on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to study things from an African mind,
Mm-hmm.
African perspective, because of it's too watered down dealing with a Western perspective. It's a great thing to start with sometimes, because sometimes you've got to start with it, and then it's not where it ends, though.
Yeah, I agree.
So I want to thank you very much, Ben Fleming.
Thank you.
And maybe we'll do this again. We will pick another topic one time, because we're just like having a little discussion now, but in the future, and then maybe we can do some research together.
Definitely.
I think that's very important to put our research together and see what we can both come with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, smash that.
Definitely.
Thank
you very much for having me.
That's a pleasure anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is James the Bowman Discovered in Season 5, dedicated to original people, and we are here today. And thank you very much, Ben, and we'll do this again.
Yeah.
Peace.
See ya.